Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for tuning in today. My name is Charlotte Maxwell-Davies and I work for Mental Health UK. I'm the head of workplace mental health. You will, if you're very observant, see that it was meant to be Liam today with you all presenting. Unfortunately, he isn't able to be here. So unfortunately for you, you've got me stepping in. So I hope I do you justice, Liam. But thank you all for coming to listen to Stress and Anxiety in the Workplace webinar. There is comments and Q&A, so please keep me company and pop some comments and questions in there throughout the talk. I'll do my best to kind of tune in and when I can. I'll also leave a little bit of time at the end to answer some questions as well. So if you pop them in, we'll do some at the end. So without further ado, I will start talking about this really big topic. So it is an introduction to stress and anxiety in the workplace. There's lots and lots that we can kind of cover and talk about in this area. So I will cover some main topics, main areas, but just to say there is lots and lots of additional information and resources out there that can help. Okay. So just a little bit about Mental Health UK. So we are 4 different charities coming together. We cover the whole of the United Kingdom. So we have 1 charity from each nation. We have over 50 years experience within mental health with our 4 founding charities. So these include Rethink Mental Illness, Support in Mind Scotland, Ad Ferriat in Wales and Windwise in Northern Ireland. So we work together, encompassing over 50 years of heritage and experience within the mental health sector to ensure everyone has the tools to live their best possible life. Mental Health UK workplace team, which is the team I work in, we work alongside organisations in lots and lots of different industries, so working with lots of people across the board. We provide support for mental health challenges through organisations and businesses, raising awareness, promoting conversations around mental health, which is so important, and helping establish psychologically safe spaces for staff to feel comfortable bringing their whole selves to work, which is what we are all about. We encourage, it's our main kind of message we want to get out. So in terms of our aims for today, as I said, huge topic, lots to go through. So these are some of the things that we will cover. We'll look at perceptions of stress at work, the impact it has, causes of stress, definitions of stress, some models to explore stress, also the pressure performance curve and the stress bucket, signs and symptoms to look for, a view of burnout, planning for your well-being, promoting a positive culture. So lots and lots to get through. It is just a kind of a taster, a bit of an introduction to some of these topics. Also, just to say the content is designed to help those of you in the workplace, but it absolutely doesn't stop there. It is so applicable in life generally, so I'm sure everybody hopefully can take something from it, and also please do pass it on. Anything that you learned or find helpful or interesting, please do pass it on to those around you. It's really important. Okay, so before I jump into the main part of this talk, I wanted to highlight some research from Statista in their most common stresses in the UK and Champion Health's latest, the Workplace Mental Health Report. This is quite a recent report. So Statista reported that the most common cause of stress is work-related. So really, really appropriate in the department I work with. So 79% of those surveyed, studied, agreed that work was the main kind of impact of stress. So from Champion Health, they highlighted some of these statistics. So a huge 73% stated workload was the biggest cause of stress within the workplace. 33% felt that high levels of stress impacted their productivity, so actually got in the way of them functioning and working at their best. And over half of those surveyed agreed that the perfect amount of stress enables them to thrive. So there is this kind of sometimes conflict between how much stress we're experiencing and the level of stress we're experiencing can impact in a way, sometimes to a positive way, but it kind of tips sometimes and becomes quite negative. We will look at this later in the talk when I talk about the stress curve. So these statistics highlight the prevalence of stress within our workplaces and our roles, and highlights the importance of having this talk today and us talking about it and thinking about it. So the final statistic seems like an outlier, so when compared to the other studies, but wanted to point out that there are some benefits to stress. So it is important to recognise that, but like I said, we'll talk about that later. Stress does need to be proportionate and not consistently or excessively high. And also just to say it is different for different people. We'll also touch on this later, but it is quite an individual thing as well. So with this in mind, perhaps we can begin to challenge our attitudes towards stress. Looking at the next slide. So stress at work. So some of these kind of sayings or factors in terms of stress can be, people can think about stress as. So interesting, I'd like to ask you, and if I can kind of multitask, which I'm not brilliant at, I will try and keep an eye on comments as well. But interesting to think about your attitude towards stress in the workplace, and also what's the impact of stress on you and those around you, particularly at work, but again, you can think about it generally. So again, building our awareness to stress is really important, and our attitude helps us to understand our relationship to stress at work. So some of these things are kind of common attitudes to stress at work, and lots of these are things that we encounter at Mental Health UK when working with different organisations and different businesses. So have a look at these and kind of tune in, see if any of these kind of apply to you or workplaces, either somewhere that you work now or maybe previously, and have a think if these mirror any of your attitudes. Just give you a second. So these are very common attitudes, like I said. These attitudes are how many of us view stress, and particularly excessive stress. See it as an inevitable part of working life, but does it actually need to be this way? And that's a really interesting question to ask ourselves. What is the damage that prolonged workplace stress can have on us? And we will touch upon this later. I'm just keeping an eye on comments. I don't want to miss anything, but like I said, I'm not brilliant at multitasking. Okay, so next thing we kind of talk about is the facts about absence. So this is kind of work-related stress absence. So from business perspective, the cost of being at work and absence is really, really significant when it comes to stress-related illness. So just this month, the CIPD, so Chartered Institute of Personal Development, shared their latest health and wellbeing at work study. So from their research, they found that a huge 76% of employers reported some form of stress-related absence in the previous year. So that's 3 out of 4 organisations surveyed. So even more surprising is how, when focusing on businesses with 250 plus staff, so those kind of bigger, medium to larger businesses, that number rises to a huge 92% of organisations. Also, just to say, as a bit of a side note, that we talk about these statistics. We know again that there is stigma in the workplace when talking about mental health and stress. So often that figure is actually lower than the reality. So lots of people will kind of attribute absence as something else, so maybe migraine or sickness bug or something like that, when actually it is often to do with mental health. So really, really interesting, and that's a huge number, and definitely showing that stress is a real issue and having a real impact on businesses. But also just to say, take it with a pinch of salt, because actually there is statistics can often be a bit lower than a bit higher in reality than what the numbers kind of say. So what this shows us is stress is particularly excessive stress is far too common in our work, and that it is a serious issue that needs to be addressed proactively. So too many of us are living with excessively high and persistent levels of stress. This can be really dangerous to our long-term physical and mental health. So stress is meant to be short term. It's a kind of an evolutionary response that we have. It's not meant to be. We're not meant to kind of experience it persistently and in the long term. It's sometimes referred to as the it's related to the fight or flight response, which is meant to be only used in emergencies, really. So it's also worth noting that stress is, it's not a mental illness in itself, but it can lead you to becoming unwell. So again, if you're experiencing stress persistently or high levels of it can be linked to issues such as depression and anxiety particularly, or it can exacerbate an existing mental health challenges, potentially triggering psychotic relapse when left untreated. So if somebody's already got a chronic mental illness, high levels of stress can often really kind of negatively impact on it. Also, just as a side note to say, this isn't to be confused with post-traumatic stress disorder, which is a mental health condition which occurs after experiencing a particularly stressful or traumatic event. So different conditions, just to say. Again, just keeping an eye on comments. I don't want to miss anything. Okay, so next of all, going to look at some of the most common causes of stress, particularly at work. But as I said before, we can kind of apply this in more general life as well. So from the previous slide, we begin to understand the relationship with stress and our attitude towards it. But what are some of the causes of stress? So as I said before, workload is a really big one. So particularly big workloads or unachievable workloads. But what are the other elements in our lives that can cause stress? So again, drawing on the findings from the Champion Health and the CIPD studies, there are some common themes of stress at work that we kind of consistently see and we should understand. So these white circled stats relate to general causes of stress within the workplace, whilst the purple stats indicate kind of external factors or potentially external factors in kind of general life. So without a doubt, it's workload that is often the biggest cause of stress within the workplace. So organisations do need to really recognise how and why the workload of their staff, this includes lives, is contributing to the stress levels of staff. And to help with this, employers can create stress risk assessments. So kind of, like a health and safety risk assessment, but particularly looking at stress and kind of attached to their particular role in the workplace as well. So management styles is a big one too. So this continues to be a really significant cause of workplace stress for many people. This shows that how harmful health can be impacted upon if organisations don't equip their line managers or people in management roles, people management in the right way, basically. So this is not blaming anyone. It's often rare that there's anyone kind of, deliberately doing this. But managers should be supported and trained to effectively manage people and understand and look after and be proactive in terms of looking after health and well-being, and that's physical and mental health. Okay. Again, just tuning into comments. Thank you for those leaving comments and popping them on there. Okay. So looking at actually, I kind of mentioned a few things, but looking at actually what stress is, thinking about stress. So we know what causes stress, we know some of those factors, we know the big ones, particularly in the workplace, and how we feel about it. But from a physical perspective, what is it? And so to help us understand, we can look at the government agency, the Health and Safety Executive, and the NHS, the National Health Service, to explain. So the HSE, so Health and Safety Executive, actually recognises stress as a negative workplace outcome and regards it as a risk. So sees it as a very negative thing. They see it the same as they would something like a trip or a slip or a fall in the workplace, and therefore workplaces are actually obliged to protect their employees from excessive stress. Tools like we mentioned earlier, so things like the stress risk assessments, are available through the HSE, and this is something that they really promote implementing in workplaces too. So the Health and Safety Executive recognises stress as a very negative outcome, regard it as a workplace risk, as I said, in terms of managing it and trying to avoid it, basically. The NHS comment or definition is much more of a kind of a physical description. So it's something that we physiologically go through. So it is the body's reaction to feeling threatened or under pressure. So it's something, it's an external factor that we perceive and then interpret it in this way in terms of stress. So it's both a physical, it's also a mental reaction, but the NHS sees it as a physical reaction, the body's reaction. Okay, so notice the common word in each of these definitions. So it's a lot to do with pressure. So we use the word stress, but what we are actually talking about is our response to pressure, which is neutral, I guess. A certain amount of pressure helps us get things done. So e.g. a deadline, an upcoming deadline really kind of like motivates us and gets us going, or, kind of cleaning up the house before visitors come, we may leave it, but then that pressure of somebody kind of arriving really gets us going, gets the hoover out. Or something like, in a workplace, something like an important meeting really might get us going, and that pressure feeling will get us thinking about our kind of preparation. But if that's happening too much or for too long, that can tip into stress. So again, let us rethink our view of stress from the initial slide to one where we are empowered to notice our warning signs. It can be really difficult and again, very different for everyone. And then also thinking about how we're able to communicate in such a way that creates more mentally healthy ways of working. So again, we want to kind of avoid tipping into that stress, and we want to kind of start noticing things before it gets too late. So this is something I've mentioned a couple of times, the pressure performance curve. This is a really, really interesting resource that we often use with people to highlight the perception of stress. So it is really helpful. Again, this will look different for everybody. So it's really helpful to think about your relationship with pressure. So what does it look like for you when pressure turns into stress? And this will be different for everyone, and also may be different in different environments or situations. That's again important to say. So the pressure performance curve is a helpful model in recognising the different stages of performance against pressure. So it's kind of split into 5 sections there. So it's definitely not linear, and the end goal is not to end up in that overwhelm section at the end. That's definitely where we want to kind of avoid. But this is really helpful to kind of recognise when pressures are starting to feel too high, and where we need time to recover between tasks. So we're getting that kind of recovery time to help us rejuvenate as well, and keep resilient. So as we go along the different sections of the curve, really encourage you to kind of think about where you are, maybe in this last week or so, if there's been lots of demands or you're feeling pressure, where you're sitting at the moment. So beginning with boredom, this is again not something particularly useful or positive feeling. So it's the kind of the enemy of productivity, I say. So this is where we have kind of no performance needs with no pressure at all. Nothing tends to get done in this area. I don't think many of us would be kind of motivated to do a lot if we're kind of sitting at this stage for a long time. The next area is comfort. So when we kind of move into comfort, we often find ourselves here when we perform kind of regular routine tasks, things like in the workplace, responding to emails or kind of administration duties, things that we do quite a lot. Things like team catch-ups that we're comfortable with, other, teammates, people that we see quite often. So we tend to leave comfort and move into stretch when we have a particular project that's due, or something like a client meeting to prepare for, or something like today, talking live to an audience. That is kind of my stretch kind of period of this graph. So something which is not necessarily every day, but might be every day. So it's something that kind of helps us give ourselves a bit of a kick, pushes us a little bit and motivates us to get on with something, potentially something quite new or a little bit of a challenge as well. So we can equate the term stretch to growth as well. It can often be quite an interchangeable term. So often acquiring new skills, working on new projects that keep us focused and add to our repertoire, our skill set. It's kind of that practicing makes perfect section. So as the case is for many of us in work, what we sometimes find ourselves doing is performing multiple tasks all at once. So let's say alongside your project that's due in, you've also been asked to provide support for a colleague for an upcoming presentation. You might have an issue going on at home, which isn't very easily solvable and quite challenging. So all of these different tasks are kind of adding up. And the longer that we're in this stretch phase, without any resolution or feeling like we're not kind of getting there or achieving something as we set out to do, we can start to kind of move into the next section, which is strain. So as the name suggests, this is the kind of the more negative, this is the dip the kind of the curve here. So in strain, we may find ourselves disengaging, our productivity may actually start to really fall, we might start procrastinating more as a result, which is sometimes what we're doing is kind of protecting ourselves, because it can be really uncomfortable. So procrastination is trying to kind of avoid something. So the longer we're left in the strain section, the more likely it is we'll get to the final section, which is the kind of the overwhelm part, which is when we're kind of starting to think about burnout. So that's something we really want to kind of avoid, and it's something we talk about a lot at Mental Health UK when we're talking to organisations in workplace mental health. So important to say, between tasks we must coordinate time to decompress, so to climb down from the stretch back into comfort, and that's going to kind of prevent reaching that burnout. So got an anecdote here which might be helpful, putting this kind of graph or this theory into context, I guess. So a friend of mine recently ran the London Marathon for the first time this year. So me, not being a fitness enthusiast, had no idea what to do or how to prepare for a marathon. So I asked him if you have to do the full 26 miles a day in order to prepare. So he laughed, as anyone who has run or knows anyone who has run a marathon knows that you don't run the full race in training. So instead he explained that you compartmentalise your training. So he ran hill starts one day, sprints the next day, long distances after that. Worked in this way to remain within his comfort zone, to reduce risk of injury and to remain motivated for the race. So when race day came, he was ready, had a good sleep, hydration, nutrition, stretching, all of that good stuff, ready to go. So as the race began, he climbed into kind of that stretch part of the graph, facing challenges he hadn't experienced in training, but had to build a strong sense of resilience and belief as each mile kind of progressed within that marathon. So he was learning, but finished with a great time, immediately began his recovery, climbing back down into the comfort through stretching, hydrating, eating well, getting lots of rest. So the key bit in this kind of story is the recovery. So after each task that comes with its own sense of kind of feeling of pressure, there must be that time to recover. And without that period of recovery, what we're doing is we're only moving in one way, one direction in that graph, towards strain, overwhelm, burnout. So that's what we really, really want to kind of avoid. So this model is really brilliant at communicating the way a certain amount of pressure motivates us, so kind of, pushes towards the stretch, which is a really, really good optimal place to be. So, with a deadline or a new challenge, something like that, when we're stretched outside our comfort zone, we are growing. So this is our kind of period of growth and our learning. So the key is to recognise when stretch becomes strain. And this is sometimes difficult to do when we're really busy and we are multitasking. So this is interchangeable with stress, strain and stress. So perhaps the demands are unachievable, you don't have the support you need to deliver, maybe you've been stretched for far too long without that kind of period of recovery. So you can think of this in terms of kind of an athlete, I guess, or you might be one, and then it will kind of work brilliantly. So stretch like an athlete. So stretch for an athlete may be running a marathon. It's what they've been training to do in their comfort zone, but you wouldn't expect them to run a marathon every day. So the athlete returns to comfort zone to recover and recharge, and that's what we're needing to do in a corporate environment as well. Again, it's sometimes difficult, but again, that's what we're kind of wanting to do for you, to reflect, think about what that looks like for you, and actually proactively make sure that you're putting it into place. So the risk is not recharging, which will lead to burnout. And burnout is something which is being talked about a lot. It's a real hazard, it's a real risk in terms of the workplace. It is recognised by the World Health Organization, referred to as WHO, as an occupational phenomenon resulting in chronic workplace stress that has not been successfully managed and can lead to illness. So we can avoid burnout by developing our self-awareness, knowing when it's time to take recovery. So we all have responsibility to do this, to ourselves, and to help our colleagues do this as well. Okay, talked about that curve a lot, but I think it's a really, really important one and really helpful for people as a tool to kind of start thinking about where you are in that curve. Just going to quickly tune into comments to see I'm not missing anything. Okay, so this next slide is looking at the stress bucket. This is again a really fantastically accessible and brilliant resource that I would really urge everyone to think about and use. So stress bucket we use at Mental Health UK all the time. We use externally with people that we talk to every day. We also use it internally all the time, thinking about our stress bucket and really, really tuning into our stress buckets as well. So you may or may not have heard of the stress bucket before. If you haven't, if you have, you'll know how fantastic it is. If you haven't, bear with me. It might sound a bit strange initially, but yeah, bear with me, and hopefully it will make sense. So if you have kind of seen this, it's sometimes referred to as different things as well. So we call it the stress bucket at Mental Health UK. So it's really good in terms of providing a visual aid to help us explore our personal stresses, our different capacities, and most importantly, the things that help us actually kind of recover or rest from stress and help us recharge. So again, avoiding that moving towards burnout. So if you have a look at that picture, the clouds up above are what we call the fillers, so the stress fillers. So these are the aspects of your life which can cause you stress. And they kind of the clouds rain down into our bucket, filling it up. So take a moment at the moment, have a think about your day, your week, your month, think about what are the clouds for you. So again, when we're talking about the stress bucket, this is a really nice visual because it is different for everyone. So there's a few examples there in terms of family stress, work stress, money stress, relationship stress. So these are really common ones, but these may not be applicable for you. You might have different ones. So have a think about what your clouds are, and what may contribute to your stress or any stress that you're experiencing at the moment. So what's raining down in your bucket at this moment in time? Have a think about it. So when we're developing awareness and understanding of our stresses, we can start to think about actions or replenishing, rejuvenating activities or exercises that can actually restore our stress levels to a normal level again, to ensure our bucket doesn't overfill. And that's what we're wanting to avoid. That's the kind of the burnout stage, when your bucket overfills, spills out. So again, I'd like to kind of ask you to reflect where you are at the moment. How full is your bucket? Also, just to say, everyone does have different size buckets too. Some people can deal with lots and lots of demands and stresses all at once. Other people may have a much smaller stress bucket, and will only be able to kind of deal with a few stresses, or even one stress at certain times. So have a think where your bucket is at the moment, how big or small it's feeling, and where the water is kind of rising to. thinking about it. So you can see the line, there's kind of a dotted line across the centre of the bucket. So this is kind of our normal capacity. So not too full, not too low. When we have more stresses than recovery aids, this bucket can fill beyond the kind of the normal level, potentially causing it to overflow. So if anyone feels that their bucket is pouring over, you may be at risk of burnout, and definitely consider exercises that can help aid your recovery. Then the next thing to think about is what helps you to feel de-stressed, or what helps you to kind of, that recovery and those recovery exercises, and what helps you kind of bring that water level down. So that's what the little holes or the taps are at the bottom of the bucket. These are the things that help kind of drain some of that water out your bucket. Again, some of these might be bigger holes than others. So a few examples here. So rest, relaxation, talking to trusted people, might be kind of going for a walk after a meeting, taking exercise, talking to friends. Again, this can be anything, and again, really different for everyone. So really individualized. So helps us climb back down to our comfort zone, as we saw in the previous slide with the graph, helping us preserve our health. So again, think about it. A really good thing to do is actually to draw out the stress bucket. You can start being quite creative in terms of what goes in there. But really interesting to think about it as a visual aid for yourselves, and thinking about it as on a really individual level, actually what that stress bucket looks like. All of us, this applies to all of us. And it's just thinking about where our water levels are, what are the rain clouds, and also what are the holes or the taps that actually help us kind of, reduce that water level from getting dangerously high. So I'm hoping that makes sense. Again, really, really good visual. Be really interested to hear from some of you what that looks like, if you've used it before, if you do use it, if you haven't used it before, is it something which you feel you could do? Yeah, pop any comments in the chat how that looks. Okay, so next of all, talking about anxiety in the workplace generally. Again, this is a huge topic, so this is just a kind of a very small introduction to it, and the overlap with stress. So that's why it's in this talk today. So similarly to stress, anxiety is a really common emotion that people, all of us, will experience at some point. So 60% of the people surveyed by Champion Health reported experiencing mild to strong feelings of anxiety whilst at work. So it's considered as a future thinking response, so with one foot in the present and the other way ahead in the future. And that's what we often find when we're experiencing anxiety. We're kind of our head mentally is somewhere in the future. We're not right now, we're not thinking, we're not in the moment. We're often thinking way ahead and kind of predicting what could happen. Often it's characterised around challenges which we can't actually control, and it's that kind of worry, fear of what's going to happen. So it can be proportionate when anxiety is linked with specific tasks. Things like if we're waiting for some medical results for a family member, or preparing for a kind of a big meeting, delivering a talk, something like that. Anxiety tends to fade once the task is over, or it's been completed. That kind of anxiety levels reduce again to kind of that recovery response. But for some people who experience an anxiety disorder, they might find themselves just feeling generally anxious a lot of the time, as opposed to being linked to a specific task. So it's kind of that consistent feeling of anxiety. So feeling intense levels of anxiety kind of frequently or most of the time. And anxiety disorders are very, very common. So again, we take statistics with a pinch of salt, but affecting about 1 in 10 people in the UK. So it is a very, very common mental health challenge. Other causes of anxiety can be linked with lots of different aspects of our life. So things like finances, particularly at the moment, job securities, health issues or worries, climate, technology, and media coverage, again, particularly at the moment with all of the things happening around us in the world. So often people feel anxiety isn't serious enough to seek help for. So in the same way they do with stress, often it's not taken seriously. But with anxiety being so prevalent and affecting so many of us, we believe there must be support mechanisms for individuals to share experiences and being signposted to support. So we have lots of tools and lots of signposting resources on Mental Health UK website. So please do have a look and explore the resources on there if you feel this is something affecting you. So what can we do to manage our levels of anxiety? So there's lots and lots of different ways. There's, again, lots of resources on Mental Health UK. I haven't got time to kind of go through them all now in the kind of 15 minutes or so left of this talk. But things like mindfulness, grounding techniques, calming our breathing, these are all kind of really, really good techniques to kind of practice so that when we are feeling anxious in the workplace or in our general life, we can kind of implement these and help calm our brain and our body down. Important to say that, like anything, practice makes perfect. Lots of techniques such as mindfulness, such as calming breathing, such as challenging negative thoughts. Don't leave it until you're at a state of high anxiety to implement it, because actually, again, it's almost like if you think about if you're wanting to, ride a bike, get on a bike to escape a situation, you wouldn't leave it the first time to riding a bike to escape a situation. You'd want to practice the bike. You'd want to know how to practice the bike before you really, really needed it. So practice it, when in a safe, calm place, when you're feeling quite good. Practice these techniques. And then when you are needing to use them, you've almost got them in your toolbox. So if you are feeling anxious, you've got it, you know what you're doing, and you can kind of bring out that tool when needed. So as an example, something which is really useful is we call kind of 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 grounding. So this is using all of our 5 senses. So again, we have things like this on the Mental Health UK website, so please do check it out. But something just as a kind of quick technique to share. So something like name 5 things you can see, 4 things that you can feel, 3 things that you can hear, 2 things that you can smell, and 1 thing that you can taste. So this again helps sometimes tune into our senses, tune into the world around us right now, and really help kind of ground us. So again, something that's fairly easy to do, not so easy when you're feeling very anxious. Sometimes writing it down can help as well. Okay. So this slide is useful in terms of looking at the different aspects of stress. So we can, it's interesting when we think about our experience of stress, what is our kind of go-to, or what do we really tune into? But actually stress does look different for all of us, but these are kind of common themes that we will have in different parts of this. Is the kind of some physical symptoms, some emotional symptoms, cognitive symptoms, so kind of what's going on in the brain, and also behavioural changes as well. So I won't go through all of these. I can kind of let you have a look at some of these individual symptoms of stress. But just interesting to see if you can spot any of these for you, maybe even things that you hadn't realised were to do with stress, but now thinking about it and reflecting on your own experience of stress, you can really kind of acknowledge and tune into. it is really useful to know what stress looks like for you. As I've said many times, it is an individual experience. There are themes, there's common kind of themes that come across, but we all will have quite a different response or experience. So really, really useful to know what this looks like for you. For me, I know that when I'm stressed, I do this. My shoulders are up at my ears, and I kind of often get real horrible tension in my shoulders and my lower back. So when I notice that, I can really tune in and think about where I am on that graph. Am I still in the stretch? Have I been in the stretch for too long? Am I now in the strain? What do I need to do to get me back to the comfort for a little bit, to be able to recover and become resilient and kind of continue on? So have a look at those and think about what your symptoms are for you. So something we have mentioned before is burnout. So again, just a little bit of an example here in terms of what that looks like. I think there is an image that is missing actually in this slide. Sorry. So as I mentioned before, WHO, the World Health Organization, defines burnout as a complete physical or emotional exhaustion, first recognised by the health body in 2019 as an occupational phenomenon. So further understanding of burnout since then has increased. So we now know that it's a contributor to burnout. Work is a contributor to burnout. It might not be the only reason, and lots of external stresses may also play a part in burnout. So the image that has disappeared for some reason to keep me on my toes is a kind of a Venn diagram. So is looking at that relationship between feelings of energy depletion or exhaustion, increased mental distance from one's job, and reduced professional efficiency. That overlapping Venn diagram, all of those aspects are then kind of leading to that burnout. So some common symptoms of burnout: feeling drained, tired most of the time, feeling helpless, trapped or defeated, feeling detached or feeling alone, having a cynical or negative outlook, having lots of self-doubt, lots of procrastination or taking longer to get things done, longer than would usually take, or that feeling of being very overwhelmed. So recovery from burnout can be a really slow process actually. It requires lots of time, lots of rest. There's no fixed time which we can say you might experience burnout for. It will largely depend on the situation and the individual, and the resulting support that they receive at the time as well. So having the awareness here is really, really important to recognise the signs and symptoms in ourselves and other people around us. We all have a duty to support our colleagues to reduce that kind of potential long-term sickness which burnout would cause. Really conscious of time, so I am going to fly through the last couple of slides. This is a really brilliant resource that everyone can use. It's a brilliant resource because it's a proactive resource, which is what we like at Mental Health UK as well. So these wellbeing plans can support organisations in managing stress of their staff. We absolutely encourage everyone to implement one. You can create your own as well, or welcome to use ours, and they are available on the Mental Health UK website. So as you can see, you're invited to think about what your own wellbeing looks like and also make a plan for when things get hard. So like I said before, it's much harder to put things into place when we're struggling. It's much easier when we've got something, a plan or a toolbox ready that we can rely upon when we need it the most. So like I said, proactive, do it when not at your worst, when you're struggling. Do it as a proactive activity or task. It's a really good exercise to think reflectively how stress affects you and what is good for you to put into place to help that kind of recovery So have a look at it, and yes, please do use that template. So like I mentioned at the start, there are a few kind of, there's lots and lots and lots of support avenues and so signposting around, lots on our website at Mental Health UK. Here are a few examples of places that you can go to if you feel that stress or burnout is affecting you, or symptoms of anxiety. Lots of information out there. Please do seek support if you feel it would be helpful. So Mental Health UK and our founding charities, we've got lots of information on all of there. Employee assistance programs, lots of organisations or businesses have these as part of their offering. So, check it out with your manager or employer if you have one. And your GP, often really good source, fountain of knowledge in terms of kind of mental health support. There's often lots of free resources or treatment avenues that they can refer you to. Samaritan's there, which has a email address and a telephone number. So again, for often if you are experiencing feelings of despair, Samaritans can be a fantastic resource to use. And the Hub of Hope website address is often really, really useful for people as well. Okay, so thank you. I've kind of flown through the lots and lots of information today. Have tried to cram a lot in there. Hopefully you've taken some positive messages or resources from this. Please do pass it on. Anything that you've found really useful or interesting, please do pass it on, because it helps create that positive culture and reduces the stigma of mental health challenges and mental illness. Again, I'm from Workplace Mental Health. We use this in lots and lots of workplaces, but absolutely applies in general life too. So please do share with friends and family if you feel it could be useful. That is it. This is it from me. There's a QR code there. Would really value any feedback to help kind of shape our offerings in the future. So please do, if you get a moment, go on there and give us some feedback. I'm going to end there and try and answer. I've got a few minutes left. Sorry, too much talking, but I will try and answer some of those questions now and have a look at comments.
Hi there, Charlotte. Thank you so much for that amazing workshop. That was so informative. We have got some really good questions coming in, so I'm going to start firing away. How does that sound?
Yes, please go for it. Thank you.
Okay, no problem at all. So our first question, just for anyone who's listening in right now, while we've got a couple of minutes left, if you have any questions for Charlotte, please feel free to pop them in the comments box. We've also posted a Slido link, which is a link to take you to a page where you can submit questions anonymously as well. And whilst we're just running through the questions that have already been submitted, you've got some minutes to submit whatever you would like to as we tie the session up. So I will go from the top. I appreciate you might have already repeated some of this, but it'll be great to just maybe whiz over that one more time for us. So our first question is, what advice do you have for employers to create a more supportive and stress-resilient work environment?
So lots and lots, and it's kind of almost where to start. I think the biggest piece of advice we kind of promote at Mental Health UK in the workplace mental health team is to try and build that kind of positive culture and proactive response to looking after your mental health. So the ways, this is tough, this is tough because as well, organizations and different businesses are all different, and we are all different, so there's no kind of blueprint of what this looks like, but I'd say it is around that kind of culture. So really trying to have conversations, open conversations around how we're feeling, being genuine about it as well. So we quite often talk about this. We, particularly in a workplace, we often say, "Are you okay?" or "How are you?" But we
Yeah.
don't even give time for people to answer. So are we really creating a positive culture? Do we actually care how
Yeah.
people are feeling? So yeah, actually, kind of it's all about that body language as well, making eye contact with somebody, genuinely asking, "How are you today?" and giving them a moment to really think about it, because sometimes we don't. And actually, sometimes when somebody asks us that, we think, actually, I'm really struggling today. I've got a lot on my plate, and sharing that can be a huge relief. So again, it's kind of just chipping away, knowing our role as individuals in a place to kind of create that safe,
Sure.
psychologically safe and open culture. So I'd say that's something employers can really do, give people time to have those conversations and genuinely ask how they're doing. And also for employers and managers to do that as well, to show that we are all human, we're not robots. Managers should be being open as well, in terms of how they're feeling, because again, it's encouraging that vulnerability, which is the only way really to challenge kind of poor mental health.
Absolutely. Well, thank you. That's awesome. Thank you so much. And that leads us on to a really nice question, very much related to that, more for the individuals wanting that access. So say if someone's struggling with workplace stress and anxiety, do you have like one golden tool for them to kind of like look to as an initial step? I know obviously you've covered a plethora of really amazing kind of resources, but if there was like one single thing that they can do to start with, what would that be?
I think I'm torn, but I think I would go for stress bucket. I think that's just a
Mm-hmm.
really, really good exercise. It's a really good reflection tool. So to
Yeah.
really tune in and think about, for you, what is going on here, what are these factors affecting me, and what are the things that I can do to put into place to really help the situation. The thing is, especially with workplace mental health, there's often lots of things that are out of our control, and that can feel really, really overwhelming. So sometimes it's about thinking about, okay, what are the aspects that I can control to really help the situation? It might not be making the situation perfect, but it might help the situation to get me towards that kind of comfort again, so I can recover, and then kind of then I'm in a much better
Yeah.
place to kind of deal with that stretch. So I think the reflection tool as the stress bucket, I think, is a great place to start. And you can share that as well. You can share that with your team or your manager or people around you,
Yeah.
to really give insight as well.
Yeah, amazing. Thank you. And I've popped that just for anyone watching who's interested in the stress bucket. That is now, there's a link in the comments box to MHUK's stress bucket page. So you can access that really quickly. That's just gone into the chat now. So it's a great tool, very visual. And I think I'll be using that myself. So thank you so much. The next question, how can we strike a balance between work responsibilities and self-care without feeling guilty or overwhelmed? Do you have any advice around that?
Yeah, I think that's a really hard one, and it's really realistic. I think also acknowledging that difficulty is a really
Mm.
important step, because it is a difficult balance, and I don't think anyone's nailed that.
Yeah.
But I think what you need to think about is, again, without being a broken record, thinking about that stress bucket. So actually, if you just kind of live in that stretch strain period all the time, you are going to dip into that overwhelm, that burnout, and then actually what use are you to anyone at that stage? And it's going to take a long time to recover. So actually thinking about that self-care bit as that, it's kind of keeping your momentum, it's keeping those productivity levels up. It's a really, really important way to look after yourself, to be able to work effectively. And if you think of it again, I'm kind of a very visual person. If you think about yourself as a battery, if you're kind of going towards the empty battery, then how do you
Mhm.
kind of recharge? You're not kind of giving out much power.
Right.
So you need to recharge that battery somehow. So actually putting in a little bit of time to kind of rejuvenate, recharge, your outcome is going to be much better as well. So don't feel guilty about it. I think, again, normalize it, encourage others. We all know it. It's just sometimes difficult to kind of put it into place. But sometimes, again, flipping it and thinking about advice you'd give someone else is much easier. So actually sometimes think about the advice you'd give someone else and take it yourself.
Yeah. Amazing insights there. Thank you, Charlotte. One more question. Just the last chance for anyone watching to submit a question. I'm just going to round off with a question around stigma. So stigma around the mental health workplace. Repeat. I'm concerned about stigma around mental health being discussed in the workplace. What would be your golden rule to make those initial steps in terms of helping me with this?
Yeah, this is a really big area. Stigma is I think being challenged. It's definitely getting better, but it is definitely still there. And there is some research that I've been looking at recently to say that it is still really prevalent in life, but particularly in the workplace as well, which is really sad. But I think it is starting to get better. I think the main thing that I would recommend to kind of really challenge stigma is to start having those kind of conversations, genuine conversations. I think sometimes it's almost people just need to be given a little bit of permission, or see really good kind of positive role models to be able to kind of start thinking about it. We all have mental health. We all do. Nobody doesn't have mental health. Everyone's on a spectrum. All of us will have better days, worse days, and it will change throughout our kind of working lives as well. There's no one that can kind of hide away from mental health challenges as well. Life is hard, work is hard, so we're all going to experience it. So I think, again, thinking about, in your kind of locus of control, what you can do. And sometimes, again, it just takes somebody to start gently kind of introducing it, making sure that we're kind of thinking about talking about it. And again, talking about, like I said before, asking people how they are, genuinely making eye contact. How are you doing today? That's really kind of good question, because it's an open question, requires a proper answer rather than yeah, fine, which often that's kind of our standard response. So again, just having those conversations. I think also at work, if you can encourage, if you are a manager or a team member, actually like building it into kind of one-to-ones, agenda, team meeting agenda things, actually having a section around well-being, because again, we know it really does impact on business. If we're going to be really pragmatic about it, there's huge absence costs in the workplace. If we can avoid them, then actually the business will do really much better as well. So if we can avoid them, doing those little things like putting it into agendas, talking about well-being, talking about if we notice kind of signs of stress, or in terms of like risk assessment, certain activities or workload pieces that actually could increase stress levels, and it's risky, thinking about it in a kind of productivity way, and that can be really useful as well.
Awesome, Charlotte. We are all done with the questions. Thank you so much. Everyone who's been watching, if you've been watching live, thank you so much. If you're watching us on catch up, thank you for joining. Charlotte, I don't know if you had anything that you wanted to close off with.
Thank you so much. As I said, I'm not great at multitasking, but I'm going to have a read through the comments now, and hopefully we've covered things. But thank you so much for everyone. Thank you to the Virtual Village Hall for inviting us at Mental Health UK. It's really, really nice to have the opportunity to speak to this group of people as well. And please do have a look at resources, see if anything that we've talked about today can be really useful for you as well.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And thank you so much to Mental Health UK for having us. and Charlotte for taking your time, and everyone home watching. Please feel free to keep in touch. Please keep the conversation going. We hope that your days are full of de-stress and peace, and thank you so much for engaging with the session today. It's been awesome. Thank you.
Thanks. Bye.